What's up, my friends? Welcome back to another week of Finding Direction. And before we even kick into this week's episode, I just want to say I hope you are having a spectacular and just phenomenal day. I hope you can take a fresh breath into your lungs and be grateful for another day of life. And also be grateful that you're about to listen to an absolutely unfreaking believable another episode on Finding Direction. And this week, to be specific, I'm sitting down with Chewning. And a little bit about Chase. He is a podcast host of the podcast Ever Forward Radio. He's a coach, and he's also a podcast coach. He calls it a coach caster. And on this episode specifically, we talk about why you should go from being good to being great. And if you're sitting in a place of your life where you're feeling good, why you should level up and go from good to great. And we also talk about if you are giving it your all and why you should look at life through that lens. All right, ask yourself, are you giving it all? And then finally, one of the things we talk about as Chase being a podcast coach is we talk about if you're thinking or looking to start a podcast up yourself, a few things that you can do to start that journey. All right, so we're going to dive into the episode. If you have not yet, as always, please subscribe to us. And if you like this, leave us a review. And if you have anybody else in your life that you know is struggling, is trying to figure out their life, just hit the share button, send this episode to them, and we would love to serve them to the highest level. And I promise you, they are going to get a load of value in this episode. And also, if you know anybody that's trying or thinking of starting a podcast, send this to them because it will massively give them some steps they can do to start moving in the right direction. All right, so we are going to dive right into this week's episode, and here we go. Chase Chewning, welcome to the podcast, man. I'm stoked to have you here.
Stu, it's a privilege, man. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. And I'm glad we caught you on a good vibe, fresh out of Tulum. The energy is good here, so I'm stoked, man.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I'm just back from vacation, but only physically. My mind is still in Mexico.
Yeah.
And apparently my clothes are too.
Your clothes are still in Mexico. So fill us in. I mean, I would be curious if you could kind of kick this thing off with giving us an insight as far as like, what did life look like for little Chase? Like, kind of paint us a picture there. Like, what was your life like growing up?
Yeah, let's go way back. It was pretty great, man. Not gonna lie. I just ran around and played all day long, and we had land and we had animals, and I had a younger brother and sister, and I grew up very, I'll say simple. I'm originally from Southwest Virginia, like way down in the mountains. Grew up on close to 200 acres. And it was just me, my family, my grandparents, had a massive garden. And it was just mountains, creeks, or as we say in Southwest Virginia, cricks, call them cricks. And so it was great, man. I, like I said, we lived pretty simply. Didn't really know it at the time, but, really, I guess, low economic status, but, we grew a lot of the food that we ate. We had family, we had community, we had land. It was just great, man. So we had a tight-knit family and community there. I grew up playing baseball my whole life, so I was pretty active in the community. And it was a small town for sure, but I enjoyed every second of it. And it treated me well. I had a great tribe, good nature and nurture all rolled into one.
Love that. And did you have an idea growing up of like I was just talking to someone about this the other day, and we were saying how it's almost like a superpower that some people in this world are just like, this is what I want to do with my life. And it's the thing they go on to do. And like if you have that ability, it literally is a superpower. And I'm curious for you, did you grow up and think I'm going to be this when I grow up? And
yeah, pretty much from the age of 5, I was like, you know what? I want to be a podcaster. I just always knew.
They don't exist, but I will be that.
It's I've been asked this question before, and I've thought about this a lot because it's one of those things I think you just kind of ponder as you get older. Like, did I become what I wanted to be? Well, what did I want to be? And honestly, man, looking back, I don't think I ever really had a really strong idea of I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a cop. I want to be a lawyer, a doctor. I was one of those kids that I always just kind of latched on to my dad. I just want to be like my dad. And my dad at the time, he was in the army, and he started off National Guard, which is like part-time military basically. And then he went active duty for several years before he wound up suffering an injury and wound up having to get medically discharged, which is also exactly what happened to me, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah.
And so I just really enjoyed seeing my dad. I mean, how cool is it to be this young kid growing up in the mountains, and your dad's this military guy, and he, comes home all the time, and he's got his uniform and his camping stuff. And like, he, for a while, was like my Boy Scoutmaster.
Nice.
And like, it was just so badass.
Are you an Eagle Scout?
I didn't make it to Eagle. I did get first class, I think it was, or like just shy of first class. So it was right before Eagle Scout.
Yeah.
But honestly, I stopped when my dad stopped being our Scoutmaster, because he was, like I said, National Guard, and then went active duty. And so he couldn't do those duties anymore. Right. And this other kid's dad took over. And I was like, you're lame.
So, yeah, this isn't cool anymore.
Yeah, you're not in the army. My dad would take us out in the woods, and we would do, the whole trial. We would do all these like outings and events, and it was like, you actually do this in real life. It was so cool, so badass. So I think from a pretty early age, I had that seed planted of, I'll just be like my dad. I'll just go do the military thing. But it was never like mandated. It was never, hey, we're a military family, this is what you're going to do. Because we really were. My uncle was in the Marines. My grandfather served in World War II in the Army. We have basically, as far back as we can kind of recount. There we go. I can't use words today. Pretty much every generation someone served. And that was really appealing to me. And so, right around the time everybody else in my school was submitting college applications and touring campuses and all this stuff, and trying to decide what they wanted to be when they grew up officially, I enlisted. Yeah. And so I just kind of followed in my dad's footsteps because it was appealing to me. And and he kind of like coached me into it all and prepped me for boot camp and all this cool stuff. So yeah, I guess I just always wanted to be like my dad.
That's cool. And I'm sure your dad is so proud, it's like,
I'd like to think so. Like to think so. Yeah. He gave me a lot of lessons and a lot of things to move forward with in my life. And unfortunately, our time was cut short. He passed away. I was 19. So he's been gone now, like 16, 17 years. But hell of a first 19 years with him on earth. That's for sure.
What's like one of the biggest things that, as you're going through life today, you get caught in a pickle, something happens, and you look for like guiding advice? What are some guiding advice that like you often come back to? You're like, oh, my dad used to always say this or that. And it's kind of something that like plants you, gives you your foundation again to kind of keep moving.
It for me always just comes back to like, am I giving it my all? Am I being a good person? I really think, and it's funny, I think a lot of us can relate, we kind of look at our life as to like, we measure like a litmus test, against like what our parents wanted or what, we thought we're supposed to do with our life, or how we were raised. And I never really fully realized how, I don't want to sound like an a-hole when I say this, but just like, honestly, how much I was set up for success with the way that my dad and my stepmom, my parents raised me. Because my only comparison is just that, like, did I prepare? Did I show up? Did I give it my all? It doesn't really matter, the term succeed or fail, because, either way, it's a win if you're really paying attention enough. And so for me, it's always, if I ever have a situation like that, I'm wondering, or I'm floundering, or just, crying out to the heavens, or just, whatever. It's just, I can really just look back and be like, all right, where's the frustration coming from? How do you feel about this? What's your measure for success? Like, did you prepare? Did you show up? Did you give it your all? Are you serving other people? Are you growing through the process? Because that was the only form of like success, or like the bar that was ever set for me growing up, whether that was as a kid, in school, as a student, or just we were in the restaurant business for a while growing up. And so as an employee with my parents there, it's just, how did you prepare? How did you show up? Did you give it your all? And if you fell short for whatever reason, like, what's the lesson in here?
Yeah.
Because if you didn't prepare and if you didn't give it your all, then that's on you. Then that's where you need to go back and kind of revisit. But other than that, what's the lesson in here? How did life kind of throw you a curveball? So no matter how well you prepared, you can never always prepare for the exact right situation because life's going to happen. So that's what I always go back to, man. It served me well then, and I really do. I really feel a lot of gratitude that me as an adult now in my mid 30s, I have that to fall back on, because I know a lot of people struggle, unfortunately, with not having that same kind of relationship with their parents or that same litmus test. And so I'm really, really grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that, man. I grew up in a similar situation where just like, yeah, you're fortunate. Like I was thinking the other day, it's like I didn't really have grandparents growing up. And it's like I just don't know what it's like to have grandparents. And it was a thought that popped in my head the other day was like, that's crazy that people have that with like their parents, And I was like, damn, like I may not have grandparents, but like I get to have my mom and dad and like have a relationship with them. And it's like you always got to look at like the things that you can be grateful for. So I feel you on that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. And yeah, it's interesting. I always wondered, like, did you not want more from me, or like, or what? Always wondered like the mentality behind a parent. And it's just, I guess maybe I'm getting, older now, and you're getting close to the age of wanting to have kids and stuff. And it's just, it gets you thinking from the other side a little bit more. Yeah, but definitely grateful for that as well. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah. So let's say we like kind of going off of like curveballs in life, right? It's like you can prepare, but you never really know what's going to happen. So if we go back in your story, right, you're like, I'm graduating high school, college, not doing it. I'm going to, be in the military. And your plan, from my understanding, is I'm going to do this for 20 years. I'm going to retire, have a pension, all this good stuff. And kind of fill us in on, I guess, the curveball there and kind of how you dealt with that.
Yeah. So that period of my life, I was dealt two pretty big curveballs. One, like I said, was the passing of my father. And at that point, I'd already been in the Army for about, about a year and a half. I was 19 when he passed.
Yeah.
He had been in about a year and a half. And so that was the first one, because like I said, a big reason, majority of the reason why I decided to go into the military was to follow in his footsteps. Right. There was no pressure from him whatsoever. It was just an option that was presented, and then I chose it. And so that happened. And so when that happened, it radically changed my why for wanting to serve. Actually, when I found out that he was pronounced terminal, he was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. I actually tried to get out of the Army. There's a clause, basically a hardship clause, that if you can prove that there is more of a need back home with your family to provide and to care than the current needs of the Army, they will let you out of your contract. I mean, it doesn't always happen, but it's there. Right. So I tried to get that ball rolling. Once my dad found out about that, quite literally with his last days of being able to walk and talk, he got on a plane from Virginia and flew to Northern California. I was stationed actually in Monterey at the time. And he just spent like 3-4 days completely just, I used to say talking me out of that decision, but that's not really what he did. He was there for me. He was a father. He was there for me in a time when I think anybody at 18, 19, when you leave home, whether you go to school, get a job, travel the world, whatever, that is a very, very unique time of your life, very formidable years. Right. And I was struggling with it. And so a father recognized his son was struggling, and he came to his aid. And just like I said, he never forced me or presented like this demanding, do this, hey, you will go in the Army. Yeah. He was just like, why? Let's just talk through it. Let's just explain it. And he really got to pour into me where his mindset was with coming to terms with death, just quite literally he was given this death sentence. And so getting his perspective and just hearing oddly how at ease he was with all of this, and just how accepting he was of dying. And just, that's when he drove home for me this concept that I'd heard my entire life. And these were these two words that he instilled in my family. And just, I saw him live, eat, act, breathe. And it was ever forward, ever forward, ever forward. Just no matter what, like you have to just keep moving forward in life. And his explanation of all of this, where he was with his disease and why he was so excited and proud and passionate for me to be following in his footsteps, but to really be creating my own path. More importantly, I realized that, okay, this is more important. And I, of course, would want to honor my father's quite literal last, wishes. And so I decided to stay in. So that was my biggest curveball. So my why for what I did for this next big thing in my life radically changed. And I was still of the mindset that I'm young, I can do 20 years and, retire at 37 and then move on to the next career, or, chill for a little bit, have all these benefits. Hopefully I've gone to college and stuff.
What did your why change to, by the way? So before it was, I want to follow my dad's footsteps. He's kind of done this. That's why I'm going to go do this. Everyone in our family's been there. And then after he kind of gave you this like settling talk, what was the new driver?
Yeah. As I'm kind of saying this out loud, I don't know if I knew at that time exactly what that was, but definitely the ball was kind of put back in my court. Yeah. I definitely was driven because this was, I served from 2003 to 2009. So this was the height of Operation Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom.
Yeah.
We were a nation at war. And I definitely had a fair amount of, I guess you could call it patriotism and wanting to serve and defend my country because I felt pretty strongly about, the attacks on 9/11 and all this stuff. But that wasn't my main driving force. So I definitely kind of fell back onto that a little bit. But honestly, for me, it was, and my dad definitely helped me realize this, the huge opportunity that this was for me, huge opportunity to learn a really, really intricate set of skills at a very young age, to potentially go see the world, to have a support system, to have a community, to be integrated with just such a diverse network that is the United States military. And like he would just drive home to me, like all the relationships you're going to make. Like, Chase, you're going to go through stuff in this community that you cannot go through anywhere else in the world, and the bonds you're going to form and the man you're going to grow into and the lessons you're going to learn. And so I guess my why kind of transformed into like the journey, the realization that this journey I had just set myself upon was going to be so, so difficult, but one of the most rewarding things in my life. And so that's what shifted for me, for sure.
Yeah.
And then the second big curveball during this period of life was when I suffered career-ending injuries that cut short my time in the military. I was, long story short, my job in the Army was a military intelligence specialist. I was a Russian linguist, and I did that for several years. That's what I was doing in Monterey. I went to the Defense Language Institute, DLI, went through their military language training academy for Russian.
So and then I did Russian.
Yeah, Yeshil Gobodo Podolsky. Yeah. I'm still fluent. Yeah. I've been out like 11 years now, but kudos to the military in this training. It's full immersion, day one, no English. It's pretty intense. So I did that for several years, for like the next 2 or 3 years. And then I decided that I wanted to kind of hang my hat up on the whole Russian thing a little bit. And I wanted to go just be a soldier. I wanted to apply my other intelligence skill sets to support soldiers downrange. I was trying to volunteer for deployments to go to Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever I could go. And a big part of that, honestly, was I did want to change what I was doing in the military, but also I was running away from the grief and the pain of my father. And I was just so distraught about that I had just kind of given up on my will to live. I never say that I was suicidal, but I just gave up. I just didn't care if I lived or died. And I was like, you know what, if I feel like this, then here's a great opportunity to literally go down guns blazing. And so I was trying time after time after time to get put onto these deployment rosters. And I wound up getting put on a path that was looking promising for a deployment. And I was in war game training, and I was leading an ambush against the fake enemy. And in that ambush, I wound up tearing my hamstring, suffered like basically my L4, my L5, my lower back kind of went one way and the rest of my body went another way. A big part of it, I just kind of blacked out. Next thing I knew, I thought I got shot. I was down on the ground. Turns out that was my hamstring snapping and tearing and lets out a really loud pop. And I was being medevaced out of that training environment. And then lo and behold, the injuries were so bad and just continued to get worse and compound because I was a horrible rehab patient, trying to just get back out there as fast as I could. Yeah. And it got so bad that they're like, Chewning, actually, we need to yank you out of not only this mission, but your job entirely, this base entirely. We need to transplant you to a medical hold unit at this other base. where you're going to go undergo the blade, and we have to basically rebuild your hips. So at like 21 years old, 21, 22, I became a patient for the next year and a half, almost 2 years of my life. Just in and out of the hospital, in and out of rehab, bedridden for months. And just I had to learn how to walk again twice. Basically, it was just a complete surgical removal, reconstruction of my femur. And they would put 2 rods in when they were done to help keep it all stabilized. And then I would get to a point to where I could rehab and get walking again. The first one was about 8 months. And then once I could walk again, once I could load bear and be on my own, it went back into the other side. So I'd go through it all again. So for about the last, a year and a half, almost 2 years, I was just a patient in the Army. And then I was rehabilitated to a point to where I could walk again. But my injuries and my capabilities at that time my injuries were so significant and my capabilities were so diminished as a soldier. They're like, you can no longer be a soldier. Like, you're no longer cut out for this. And so they medically actually retired me. So at like 24 years old, I left that base in San Antonio, Texas with my belongings in my car, my wheelchair strapped to the roof of my SUV, and just drove home. Left Texas, went back to Virginia to kind of just start life over again.
Yeah, that I can only imagine. Basically, I mean, your whole vision for your life, 20 years you're going to do this, is now
psych.
Yeah. So what was, I mean, because I've had my own experiences where something similar to that. It's like, I know what I'm going to do for my life. I'm here. This is my purpose. And then all of a sudden one day something unexpected happens and you're like, holy shit, this is clearly not the plan that I was put on this earth for. And you got to refigure out like, okay, why am I here? What's my purpose? So for you, how did you go through that process of, I mean, one, now you're not just mentally trying to figure it out, you're physically, literally getting your body to start working again. So like, what was that process like for you to go, okay, was in the military, I got to find this next thing that really lights up my soul. Like, how did you go through that process?
I did not get to that soul lit up phase right away. It took me quite a bit of time, totally honest, man. But what I did know was that I had to keep doing something. I had to move forward, ever forward, right? And I thought at the time, like, what am I going through? What do I need? And I had this inner monologue for a while. Like I said, I was medically retired. So I was getting financial benefits, medical benefits. I could get educational benefits. I could have just chilled. It wasn't a whole lot of money, but I could have been fine.
Enough to get by. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I was quite literally still rehabilitating. Like I said, I was still using a wheelchair. I was off and on a cane. And so, I mean, it would have been a while before I could have done anything worthwhile. But I realized that, Chase, if you chill here now, the odds of you staying here are pretty likely. And I just didn't want to get complacent. I didn't want to, maybe I had the awareness at that time to kind of really be conscious of what my dad was talking about. I mean, I don't know. I had so much going through in my head at the time, but I knew that I had to get going on the next mission. It probably, was still the soldier in me just thinking, okay, well, this mission's over, right? Well, what's the next one? I got to, what's the next thing? And so, I think like literally 3 weeks after getting out of the Army, I was a full-time student. I enrolled in school. I was went to Virginia Commonwealth University, VCU, in Richmond, Virginia. And honestly, it was great timing because I kind of a big reason for me wanting to immediately go home was because I was away from my family during this hardship of my father's illness for so long. And I felt so compelled. I was like, I need to go back home. I want to be with my family. And my brother and I are 4 years apart. He's 4 years younger than me. And he was just starting college at the same time. And I was like, how cool will this be? Let's just go to college together, bro. And so that's what we did. And so I got to just kind of plug back into that life that I felt like I left behind. And so I started school. I went to college and I chose a program that was going to serve me at the same time. I literally had no idea what I wanted to do with my life next. I hadn't even thought about a job because why would I need one? Like I said, I had all these benefits.
Right.
So I chose exercise science. And it's very weird for a kid to roll up to campus to have his mom help chauffeur him around and hobble around on a cane to sign up for exercise science. Like, cool, Chase, like we A for effort, but like, let's be real here. And I was so driven at that time because, like I said, I needed the next mission. I wanted to be with my family,
Yeah.
but I really was just not accepting yet this new, not a death sentence, but just, hey, here are your limitations for the rest of your life. The military, the doctors, the physical therapists, they were all like, hey, we got you to this point and this is all we can do. You just need to accept this stuff. You're going to get better. You're going to be able to walk again, but forget running, forget exercise, forget weightlifting, forget anything that you thought you could do for the rest of your life, like you have been doing in the Army, playing sports, how I grew up. Your life is going to be radically different now. And I just wasn't ready to accept that. So I thought, well, what can I do? I can try to find all these new doctors and go through that whole rigmarole, or I can devote my next 4 years of my life to understanding the human body, anatomy, physiology, exercise training, periodization. It was a semi holistic program, this college. And so I began to learn a lot of different modalities. And so about 2-3 years in, I began to get a lot better because of what I was learning and applying to my life. I was back training again. It was modified, of course, but I was just getting a lot of my life back, my physical capabilities. And I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. So I began to, I was a personal trainer. I worked in corporate wellness. I became a certified health coach, wound up going to grad school for health promotion and nutrition. And it was great because the whole time I was serving myself and I was getting better physically, mentally, emotionally. I was devoting myself to all these conferences and certifications and higher education, but then I was also being it. So I got to learn it, apply it for my own life and my own betterment. But then also I was working in the career field as well. So it kind of just happened, man.
Yeah. So like you were almost your first student in the sense, whereas like you were working on
very
yourself,
much so. And still am.
Yeah. And so one thing I'm curious is, so like you eventually graduate, and from my research on you work at a couple different places doing stuff with like physical therapy, but also doing it with mindfulness and incorporating like your mind, your body, kind of all of this.
Yeah.
And at a moment you kind of in your journey decide like this isn't what you want to do. And from my perspective, you could tell me if I'm off, but it sounds like you were living a good life, right? And it's like you had this career, you really enjoyed it, it was good, but you knew there was something that you were supposed to do that was greater. And so, and I'm going to kind of fast forward through parts of your story, but it's like then you leave that and then you're doing stuff with coaching and you have separate coaches that are all part of this thing. And then you realize, okay, this is good and it's working, but like there's something else that's great. So I got to like just drop this and go on to the next thing. And I'm curious, like, what do you think's given you the ability to have something that's good and allow yourself to go, this is good, but I know there's something different that's great, and take that leap? Because I think for so many people, it's like, well, if it's good, it's good. Don't break what's not fit, or don't fix what's not broken. But you've kind of had this approach from my view of like, there's more, there's greatness. So like, let me leave good for great. And I'm curious, like, have you been able to do that?
Date a Middle Eastern person. Total honesty, man. I really don't know if I would have as much drive for more as much if I did not meet my wife now. We met, it was like my last semester actually of undergrad. I was just finishing college and I was very comfortable. I was still getting my military benefits. I was working this new job. I was in this town in Richmond, Virginia. I mean, cost of living is really, really not that much. I was very comfortable until I met my now wife, May. She's Persian, and she's very, very driven professionally. And I think it's, part of the culture. It's just like, are you going to be a doctor? Are you going to be just more. Yeah. And she just kind of called me out. She still to this day has a very great way of looking into me and telling me and letting me know when I'm chilling, when I'm comfortable. It doesn't happen as much anymore. She always jokes. She's like, I created a monster because now I'm just like, drive, go. Yeah. But she basically was just like, okay, cool. Like, are you going to go to grad school? Like, grad school? Why would I go to grad school? I hate school. And well, if you want to maybe excel in your career, in your profession, it's good to have more degrees, certifications. And She wasn't as nice at the time, total honesty, but I could tell that even though maybe her delivery, I was a little having some friction with her intention was very pure. And we fell in love very fast. It was very real, very soon. And I realized really quickly that, okay, if I want her in my life for long term, I need to be taking these things seriously. And so I guess really when you get down to it, Stu, fell in love. And I realized that, in order for me to keep this love and to grow with this love, I need to grow more as an individual. And kind of getting a little off of the question, I guess, but I really do think that is a really, really important piece of personal development advice, and definitely relationship advice, is that you have to keep growing as an individual. The second that you lose yourself in a relationship or in a partnership or whatever, I really do think that it's a slippery slope to that relationship suffering, a relationship crumbling, or you just wake up a year, 5 years later, and you're like, holy hell, who am I? What am I doing? I gave up so much for this other person, or I sacrificed this. You just realize, oh, I could have done this, should have done that. And man, it was love. It was drive. It was tough love. It was Persian love, but yeah. And it was, I guess really what I'll say there is having someone in your corner, in your circle, that respects you enough and loves you enough and cares enough about you to push you and to call you out and to motivate you. And it worked. So I applied to grad school. I was like, she wants me to go to grad school. So I applied to grad school. I got in, I went to grad school. I worked, I got promoted. I, climbed the ladder in this concierge medical practice. I went from being just a health coach in there to running the whole department. I was their wellness director, managing other coaches, managing other offices. And then, and then kind of like the next thing happened to where I realized I'm losing a little bit of my zest for this. I love my job. I love what I did, the people that I helped and the team that I served. But like that organization began to just drain the lifeblood out of me. Yeah. And when I lost my zest for it, I realized like the moment that I showed up to work and didn't want to get out of my car to go to work, I knew that something was off. And so I began to kind of just lean into that. And that's when I started my side hustle. I started, coaching and training other people on the side, family members, people in my apartment building and our apartment gym, began to, do online coaching, and just built an exit plan basically. And then, the end of 2017, I said goodbye to that job, went double down on the podcast. I'd already started that year. I began to do double episodes a week, learn how to monetize it a bit more, started Everford Coach. Everford Radio was thriving. And just leaned heavily into me. And my wife created a monster, and it hasn't stopped growing ever since.
What's your wife's name?
May, just like the month.
Shout out to May.
Yeah. She's amazing.
That's awesome, man. So what I would be curious is when you approach something new, how do you typically go about that? Because I know obviously the podcast, you've done a lot there. You're coaching people a lot in that space now. You've done coaching. You've done kind of a lot of different things, and you've done very well at all of them. So I'd be curious for you, and you're still super young. So like, I'd be curious when you approach something new, what's sort of your mindset when you are like, all right, I'm going to do this new thing. Do you have a certain way you kind of look at that?
Yeah. Timely question. I've really been thinking a lot about this lately, because I am this year, 2021, well, I guess 2020 and leading into 2021, I think for a lot of people, but definitely for me, I've had a lot of pivots in my business and pivots in my life in terms of day-to-day operations and things like that. And what's possible really, what do people need? What do people want? And what can I provide? And how can I provide that and be of value in the same way, but, grow in new ways. I've really been able to turn back now when I am faced with something new. And instead of like the typical entrepreneur, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, instead of the typical entrepreneur going, I can do it all, I can master it, just give me enough time and YouTube and courses, like I can figure it all out. Well, that may very well be true, but I just don't have that much time anymore. And more importantly, I realized the value of just knowing what I know and knowing what I don't know, and then outsourcing, delegating. And so at this point, 4 years into being an entrepreneur, and particularly 4 years as a podcaster, I've realized that I have met a lot of amazing people who are really, really good at a lot of unique things. So when I am presented with a new endeavor, an obstacle, or even a new opportunity, or I want to create a new business or create new anything, I really lean into, okay, what is my big picture for this? What do I want it to look like, feel like? And then what can I do to create that? And then anything that's left over, anything that I can't do towards that vision, I very quickly will begin to just talk to those people that I know can do that. Instead of just trying to just be a master of all trades, I am just like, I want to just nail what I can nail. And then I want to create with other people. Because I really do. I love seeing other people in their element. I love seeing, like, if you're really good at this skill set or you have a passion for that, like, I love being a part of, I love being a witness of that. I think it's so cool when people can just step into their greatness and just flourish. So a lot of that.
Okay. Cool. And one other question I have for you, and then I have basically our last question, is obviously you do a massive amount in the podcast space yourself. You're helping a lot of people there. I'd be curious if there's someone listening to this and they're going, I've always thought about starting one, kind of on the fence. Like, what are 3 tips that you would give them, as if, like, okay, you made the decision now, like, they're listening to this and they're like, all right, this is the sign from the universe. I'm starting the podcast. Like, what are 3 tips that you would give them on, like, do these things? Or maybe one of them's like, definitely don't do that, to really get it rocking.
Well, I will always say, just hit record. If you're thinking about doing something, especially if you're, like, to your question, if you're thinking about starting a podcast, just literally hit record. Start with just grab your phone, do a voice memo. If you get a microphone, whatever, just however you're going to do it, just do it. Because I spent, before I launched my show, I spent about 6 months, 4 to 6 months, just thinking about it, trying to master it, trying to figure it all out, talking to people, research. It's not necessary. It's not necessary. So literally just hit record, and then you will find the next step and the next step and the next step. After that, I will say, if I could go back and do it all over again, especially because at the time I still am a certified health coach, and I would have had the intention to grow my show, grow my audience to more directly and more immediately serve my coaching business. So if you are listening and you have a product or a service, or you have a skill set, or even if you think you want to, go into it with that intention of, eventually I am going to market myself. I'm going to sponsor my own show. I'm going to pitch my product, my service. So with that in mind, in 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever that may be, I'm talking about my coaching launch or whatever. Right. How am I going to, cater the messages, cater the guests if you're going to be doing interview style? What are going to be my calls to action in my show notes? What am I going to do to kind of really reverse engineer to make that launch, that pitch, whatever, as successful as possible? And it all comes down to building extreme know, like, and trust with your audience. They have to view you as the authority, the expert, or just a very, very, very trustworthy person on this matter before they're ever going to sign up for your coaching, click that link, buy, or whatever. Right. So just hit record. I guess really, build with the end in mind of, like, you selling yourself, basically. Because the podcasting platform is so unique, and there is so much know, like, and trust to be had because of the long format content. And number 3, beyond that, don't sell yourself short, especially if you get to a point to where you want to monetize it through a podcast partner or sponsors, ad, whatever. I think this is more true now than when I was starting. Don't sell yourself short in terms of your total brand value. Traditionally, if you're going to be doing a sponsorship, it's called a CPM, a cost per milli. They're going to give you X amount of downloads for X amount of X amount of dollars, for X amount of thousand downloads. Well, most people now, you have a podcast, and then probably your podcast has an Instagram or other social media platforms. You probably have, or are going to build an email list, website, wherever you have a digital footprint and you're sharing this content. Look at that number. This is something I did about two and a half years ago that completely transformed the business model of my podcast. Because you're going to have your audience size and your downloads, for sure, your downloads, your streams, your views, wherever you're putting it. But then my email list, my Instagram, my Twitter, my Facebook, any unique promo videos I would make. What is that number? And that was much bigger. What is my reach? What are my demographics? Right. So don't sell yourself short and just sell your podcast, because you are much more than that. You are a brand. If you're a good podcaster, if you're a consistent podcaster, you are your show, you are your brand, and that brand has a much bigger reach. So do a little bit more homework, figure out that total number, that big digital footprint, and then present that value to a potential partner.
Heck yeah. Solid. So I mean, if people want to get more info on you, Chase, see what you're up to, where's the best place for them to find you and kind of dig into your world a little deeper?
Yeah, so 3 times a week now. I'm dropping new episodes on Everforward
Yeah.
Radio, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's all things fitness, nutrition, mindset, holistic health, wellness, entrepreneurship, a little bit of military every once in a while. So I'm there on Everforward Radio, wherever you listen to podcasts, and then Instagram, really kind of my two big platforms there, just at Chase_Chewning. And my Instagram is really kind of just like a personal version of the podcast. I'm still very health, wellness driven. I'm sharing anything and everything that I'm trying in my training or my relationships or sleep hacks or diet or whatever. And then you'll just hear a long format episode about it on the podcast.
Heck yeah. Cool. So last question that I have for you. This is a question we ask every guest because we're all about how people find direction, but doing it through action. And the last question is, what would you say is one thing someone listening to this can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction in their life?
Pay attention to the gifts that others already receive from you. I think that when we're looking for direction in our life, a lot of times we feel like, well, not only which direction should I go, but what am I good at? What should I do next? What should I double down on? What should I explore? And our ordinary is somebody else's extraordinary. What you are naturally talented at is something that somebody would pay for, something that somebody would follow and watch. And a lot of times we don't realize that, we don't see it because it's just, well, this is who I am. This is how I be. This is, this is what I'm interested in. So I would say lean into that. Pay attention to the gifts that others already receive from you. What I mean by that is, are you the person that all of your friends come to for relationship advice? Does your audience always tag you in something they find on Amazon? Are you that person who finds the new, cool, trendy things? And if you can't figure that out just by kind of like asking that question and looking a little bit deeper, just straight up ask your friends, ask your family, put up a poll on your Instagram story. Hey, what do you think of me as? Am I the relationship person? Am I the copywriting person? Am I the connector? Whatever. And just figure it out. I mean, from there, because like I said, it just doesn't stand out most often to us because it's just our ordinary.
It's normal.
Yeah.
Love it.
That's quite literally, that's a case in point why I started the podcast. Since I was a pubescent teenager and my testicles decided to drop out of my body, my voice changed. I've heard my entire life, like, hey, you should do radio. You should do radio. And I didn't care about radio at all. But then one day, in my health coaching career, I was listening to podcasts and they were helping me so much in my job. Someone said, oh, you have a great radio voice. And I was like, well, actually, what about podcasts? I should do a podcast. And they're like, oh yeah. I listen to that too. So, I mean, it's just how I talk. It's who I am. I can't control this whatsoever, but people have been telling me my whole life,
right?
Hey, Chase, we like your voice. I like listening to you. So, okay, cool. Here's something that I can act on immediately that I know people already receive.
Yeah. I have an extraordinarily similar story where people told me something similar growing up. And then one day I watched like a Gary Vee video and he's like, you got to get content out there some way. And I was like, don't like writing, not really a video dude, super big. I was like voice. I was like podcast. That's it. So
there you go, man.
I definitely feel you on that.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, Chase, man, it's been an honor to have you here. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for imparting your wisdom. And man,
my pleasure.
Thank you so much for being here.
Appreciate you. Thank you.